So, welcome to Google Classroom Cleanup. So, this is kind of an important thing every year at the end of the year or at the start of the school year. It's important to clean up what you had for the year past. So whether it's just archiving, whether it's removing students, whatever it might be. But since the pandemic, we've been using Google Classroom more and more. So I just like to offer the opportunity for you to be able to have a little bit of time and clean up your classroom and see some of the best practices. So you can see here, I have some just generic classes. So we're going to go through some of these just for some tips and things that you should do, like I said, before the next school year begins. So we are going to first start looking at one of the important things is returning student work. So we're going to talk about student work, and I know I have all different grade levels on here. So for our littles, this might not be an option. You might not have your kids click on that turn in button or submit so that they're turning in their work and it's changing ownership. My middle school, high school teachers that are on here, you guys probably do have your students click that turn in button. And what happens is it changes ownership. So it changes ownership from the student to the teacher so that the teacher can look through it, they can do their grading, they can add their comments, but it needs to be returned to the student for two reasons. One, it gives the ownership back to the student and they can decide if they want to delete or organize their files. The other thing that it does is if you've provided any type of comments, it allows them to see the comments. While it is turned into you, the teacher, students cannot see any of those comments that you post. So if you are critiquing a research paper and putting comments on the side, they're not going to see that until you've returned their work. So let's start by looking at that. There's multiple ways that you can look at student work. I can go through each of my classes and go to my classwork page, and I can look through here by clicking on each of my assignments. That takes time. So for example, I know here, I know I have one that's been turned in that I have not returned to my student. If I look here at my country project, I know everything's been returned because maybe that was early on in the school year. So that one's done, it's been completed, everything's been returned to my students. So again, like I said, going through each of those classes, each of your assignments, that takes some time. So there is a feature from your dashboard that is called to review. So if I click on this is going to bring up all of my work that I need to look at. So you can see here, it's looking at all of my classes and you can see that they are all color coded. It has the class name and then any due dates if that assignment had a due date. And you can see here, a lot of my classes, because I use this for demo and instruction, a lot of my assignments don't have due dates. So those are all categories up here. There's 113 of them that I have hidden. But what you want to do while you're looking in the to review is you want to look at this first column. So you can see it's broken down into three areas and these are clickable areas. So I can click on the assignment name, I can click on the turned in, and I can click on the assigned. So if I'm scrolling through here, you want to see goose eggs or zeros because you want everything to be returned to the student. If you have littles, so, and you're not having your students turn in their assignments, you're just looking at it as they're working on it, this is okay to have numbers here. So you might see just like this one, if I sign this to, a group of second graders, I want them to read the article and maybe answer a question in their journal. They're not clicking on the turn in button. So I've assigned it to 4 people. This should still be 0, but you're probably also going to see the graded listed as 0 as well. But as we're scrolling down through here, you can see some of my assignments here. they have items that have been turned in. So that means that that student has turned it in to me. I have become the owner of that document. It makes it view only for the student. So I want to make sure I look it over and get it returned to the student. And now at this point, you might be like, oh, well, I already graded it in Progress Book and I don't really need to grade it here in Google Classroom, but you still want to get it returned to that student. So let's look at this. So I'm going to look at this worksheet. I can click right here where it says turned in. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to see the one student who has turned this in. So my demo 10 has turned in this assignment and I have not graded it or returned it to the student. So why is this important to turn it into the student? Well, because when we're looking at this, if I click on this folder here, this is going to take me to all of the assignments that my students have turned in my Google Drive. Now, many of us don't go here. We don't really search our Google Drive to look for the student assignments. We typically come to this screen. But what happens when I'm looking in my Google Drive is that if I'm looking at all of my assignments, you can see who the owner of these are. Well, you can see right here that this one assignment, I am the owner of it. So if I delete this assignment, I delete it from myself and I also delete it from the owner, which happens to be demo 10. So, especially at the middle school, high school, there are times there's portfolios, there's resumes, there's research papers that the students are going to want to use over and over again or year by year. Maybe they're going to add to it or make changes to it and resubmit it. You want to make sure that they are back to the owner of this. So let's go back into my Google Classroom. So going back into my Google Classroom, and hold on one second because I did want to show you this. Let's look at our demo. So I'm going to get signed in as demo here. So looking at my demo student, if I go into that class and I'm looking at my assignments, so here's my worksheet. If I look at this, you're going to see it's going to be a read only. Yes, I know it's a PDF, so it's going to be read only anyways, but it's not going to let me do anything because I am the owner of it. The teacher is the owner of it. So I want to switch that ownership back to demo 10 so they can decide if they want to delete it. They can move it into folders. They can reuse it again next year if they want. So in order to do this, I can grade it, but now at this point in time, if you're like, oh, well, they don't really need a grade because I already put it in gradebook. But if you want to put a grade in, you can put a grade in here. So maybe the student got a 9 out of 10. You'll see as soon as I fill in a grade, it automatically checks the student. If I don't put in a grade, it leaves it unchecked and I can manually check it myself. Either way, it doesn't matter. But as soon as this is checked, you'll see that there's a big button up at the top. In my case, it's purple. Depending on your color theme is going to depend on what color that is. But then as soon as I click on return, it's going to say, I'm going to return this work to one student. If I have multiple students, this number is going to change. So if I'm returning it to a class of 20, it's going to say return the work to 20 students. If I put a comment here, that comment goes to all 20 students. So be careful. You don't want to say, demo 10, you turn this in a little bit late because all 19 students are going to see that. So just be careful with these private comments here. It goes to any of the students listed on this screen. So in this case, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to put a comment. I did not leave a grade, but I want to return the work. So I'm going to click on return. You're going to see it changed from the return status or the to review status to now that it's been assigned. So it's been graded. If I go back into my Google Drive, so actually let me just refresh that here. So I'm going to click right here on this folder to get back into my Google Drive, and you'll see the ownership has now changed. So I am no longer the owner of it. Do I still have access to this document? Of course. If I click on it, I can still open it. I can still look at it. I can still modify it. I can add comments to it. But now Demo 10 has ownership of it. So if they want to delete it, they're like, that was a worksheet. I'm never going to use this again. They can click in here. They can come in. They can delete it themselves. Then it deletes it from them, the student, as well as me, the teacher, because in this case, Google Classroom basically just shared it with me. Any questions with returning student work? I'm going to come back to the screen and of course back to my to review. So now you can see that it's 0 has been turned in. Notice nothing has been graded because I did not give that student a grade, but it's been assigned there. So this is the column that we're looking at. You want to make sure all your work is returned to the student. Okay, we will talk more about our Drive folder in a few minutes, but let's talk about our classes and what we want to do with these classes. So there's a couple options preparing for the 22-23 school year. So one option is you've created a classroom and you're like, it is awesome. I have everything organized. I have column or topics. Everything's in the topics as needed. I love how it's set up. I'm going to use this all again next year. In that case, you're going to want to copy the class. When we copy a class, several things copy over: topics, assignments, and that's it, which is nice because my people, they do not copy over, and anything on the stream does not copy over. So it creates a clean stream for you to start the new school year with. The second choice, and I'm going to show you both of these. The second choice is you're like, okay, I have some things. It looks good. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to use this, but I organized it by dates. And I know I'm not necessarily going to be teaching Unit 3 the end of April to the beginning of May. I want to be able to reuse it when I want. So in this case, we would archive this class, and then in the new class, we would create and reuse posts. So let's look at the difference of doing that. Okay, so back to my classes. I'm going to look at Mrs. Baltic's classroom. And I'm like, this was organized perfectly. It's organized more for an elementary. Yes, and good question. If you copy a class, and I will show you that, if you copy a class, you can modify throughout the school year. So, and I'm going to show you there are some perks to copying versus reusing posts, but again, it's depending how you set it up this year to how you're going to reuse it for next year. So again, this is my class. It's set up more elementary because it's more subject based. But middle school, high school, you might have it subject based too, because you might have general math, you might have algebra 1 all in one class, or you might have units. So you might have science units. So you might have, earth science, physical science, and so forth. So even though it might be, period 1 science, you might have it broken down into those different units. So let's go back to our dashboard. And this case, I'm like, it's set up how I want. I want to make a copy of this. So I'm going to click on copy. When you are naming, so I'm going to give you some tips with naming. So Mrs. Baltic's classroom is not super specific. So what you want to do is make sure when you are naming, you want to give it some type of class name that's going to identify what it is, and you want to make that at the beginning, because some applications that Google Classroom works with doesn't always take all of the characters. It only allows so many characters to be visible. So you don't want it to say Mrs. Baltic's classroom, period 1. Well, then you go into an application such as Go Guardian and you're going to see Mrs. Baltic's class, and that's all you're going to see. So you're not sure if it's period 1, if it's period 3, and so forth. You also don't want to leave it as vague as math. So be a little bit more specific. Is it 22, 23 math, or is it period 1 math? So again, put those identifiers at the beginning of your name so that if any application that you're using does not allow all the characters, that you have that at the beginning to be able to see. You would hate just to be able to see algebra 1, algebra 1, algebra 1, because then you're not going to know which one is which. You can use the section. The section displays, you can see here, my American Lit has the gradebook sync underneath it. However, again, some applications don't pull in the section information. So just be careful. That's why I try to say include that information in your class name when you're creating the class. So in this case, we are going to call this first. Yeah, we'll do first period. So this is more of an elementary setup. So I was thinking, because a lot of times we call our elementary classes based on the homeroom that you have. So you might have Mrs. Smith's homeroom, Mrs. Miller's homeroom, and Mrs. Baltic's homeroom. So the Google Classrooms might be named based on the homeroom teacher, even though it's math. So we'll do that. We'll say Smith's homeroom. I can't spell. Okay, so Smith's homeroom, this is math. And I'm just going to hit copy. And I know it doesn't go along with my topics, but you'll see the example here. So once I make a copy, and it'll take a minute, it is going to copy over, again, any of my topics, anything that was in your classwork. So any of your topics, any of your assignments. It does not copy anything from the stream, and it does not copy any of the people, including co-teachers. So if you have a co-teacher, you will have to re-add them to the new class for the 22-23 school year. It also does not carry over any settings. So be aware of that. So my suggestion is the first thing you do, as soon as you copy a class, click into it, go to your settings and see what you want. So I'm going to click here. You can see there's my class name, my invite code. So the first day of school, if I'm going to give them their invite code, by default, it always says students can post and copy. And like I said, this does not carry over from class to class. So if you only want yourself to be able to post on the stream, you need to make sure that you come in here and change that. Okay. Then if you want anything on the stream from your classwork, you can pick here. So some people hide the notifications, so the students have to go to classwork. Some people leave it as show condensed notifications. So it says Mrs. Baltic posted a new assignment, and then there's a link to take them into the classwork. So that's up to you. I'm going to leave it as hide. So my stream is going to be clean. And then I am going to click on save. So in here now, I can see that my stream is clear. So there's nothing in here. But if I go to my classwork, all of my assignments came over. All of my, I keep wanting to say column headings. Can you tell I was working in Excel? All of my topics were coming over. Everything is here. But do you notice something on the right-hand side? Everything is listed as a draft. So nothing is visible to the student until you post that assignment and or material. So you're safe to copy. Students can start entering your classroom. They are not going to see anything. They actually do not see this topic until there is an active post in there. So for example, maybe the first week of school, we're going to start on our math facts. So I'm going to click on the snowman menu, those three little dots, and I'm going to click on edit. Once I click on edit, this was the question that was in the chat earlier. Can you modify throughout the year? Yes. So here are my math facts. Maybe I need to add a new Google file or maybe a new YouTube video. So I'm going to put in here, we're going to look for some math facts. I'm going to search for that. And maybe I'm like, oh, this was a really good one. I want to show them this one. So even though it's an hour and 14 minutes, wow. So we're going to add that one. And now that's in there. Okay, so you can modify as needed. Everything's going to come through as draft. I can assign it a due date. If I did not want this topic, I can actually remove this topic and create a new one, or all the topics that have been copied over, those are going to be listed here as well. So again, you can use the topic that's already there, or you can create a new one. I can assign it to this class as well as multiple classes. So all my classes are here that I can assign. And for those of you, if you haven't been scheduling, you can now schedule to multiple classes. So if I need to assign this to Mrs. Smith's class and Mrs. Baltic's homeroom class, I can still schedule it ahead of time. This used to be grayed out and it is now available. Okay, but I'm just going to leave it for the one. And then once I click on assign, and let's put a due date on here. We'll put this due date as next Wednesday, and I'm going to hit assign. So now the students will see this. You can see that it is no longer grayed out. It populates in the color, and it also puts the due date. So again, some people, depending on how many assignments you had, how many topics you have, they don't like to copy because then there's so much to scroll through. In this case, again, I'm using this as an example, so I don't have a ton of assignments. But if you've created a course that you used all school year, you might have, 50, 100 assignments, and you might not want to have to worry about taking it out of draft and posting it and finding it and so forth. So my other option is I need a class. Okay. So I don't want to copy this class. I like how it's set up. I like all of the assignments, but I don't know if I'm going to go week by week like it has here. So I'm just going to reuse the post as I go. So I'm going to, instead of copying a class, I am going to create a new class. So I'm going to click on my plus and say create class. And this is going to be my first period math. And maybe this is for Mrs. Miller or whatever, but I'm just going to leave it first period math. And then maybe I'll put 22, 23. And I'm going to create. Takes a second. There it goes. So once I create my math class, everything is empty. So I don't have anything on the stream, nothing in my classwork, and no people. So nothing is listed. So again, I would need to add any of my co-teachers. My students, I always suggest still using that invite code so they all join at the same time versus trying to invite them individually. Same thing when I create a new class, my settings are at the default. So if I do not want students to be able to post, I want to make sure I change this to only the teacher can post. And then what my stream should look like. Do I want to hide my notifications or do I want the condensed version? So I'm going to keep it the same as the other one and I'm going to hit save. So now when I'm here, I'm like, okay, well, I had those good assignments in my math class last year. Now, instead of creating them new, I'm going to click on create, reuse post. I am going to find that class, which was my 6th grade math. And then I am going to pick the assignment that I want. So maybe it was this quick, the bell work. I want to reuse that first day of school. It's already created for me. I'm going to click on it. I am going to say reuse post and it's going to populate. Now, Notice it will bring everything over. I can modify as needed. I can add anything as needed. Notice it brings over the topic. And remember, those topics are the ones that I did not necessarily want to use because it was week 2, week 3, week 4. Now I want to classify those more into units. Maybe instead of, going week by week, this year I want to go in units. So this is going to be my unit 1. So I'm going to X out of here and I'm going to click and then say create new topic. And now I can put unit 1. And then once I have that, again, I can determine if I need to change the point value for this year and if I'm going to have a due date. And then I'm going to ask my question, and then it's going to populate in my classwork. Okay. So any questions with the difference between copying a class versus reusing a post? And we have a little bit more to talk about reusing posts, but I just want to stop for a second and see if there's any questions. Okay, so reusing. So here's a couple other things. So I'm going to go to my stream. Okay. So like I said, whether you're copying the class or you're creating a new class, you are not going to have anything in the stream. Copying a class does not allow you to bring anything from the stream. So I'll repeat that in here in just a second. So if you need to reuse something from the stream, so maybe you have some directions, maybe you have your office hours, your plan time, whatever it might be. If there is something that you want to reuse, there is the option from the stream to reuse a post. So if I click on this, it is going to ask me what class I want to use. So if I'm going to pull this from my 6th period math class, and then I just say, it says, please click on the classwork tab above. That's all it says. And I want to reuse this. So I'm going to click on reuse and I can modify it as needed. Okay, so if I need to click, add anything, change anything, and then I can click on post and you can see I reused that stream post. Okay, that is different than clicking on classwork. If you are never going to use the stream, you're not going to use this to post any information, then I would use material in your classwork because that will copy over if you are copying a class. Okay, so anything in your classwork, assignments, questions, materials, topics, those are all going to copy when you decide to copy a class. So if I decide to copy a class, I would come here, click on copy, and then I would name it and it will copy everything over. Once it copies everything over, your topics will come over and everything will come over in a draft. So you have to get that from the dashboard, the 3 little dots, copy. Okay. If you're not going to copy it, then you would make your new class. So we have our class, we created it, we are going to reuse posts. We don't want to keep this. This is from last year. We don't want to keep this visible on our dashboard. So it's just getting in the way. I have other classes. Maybe I have 5 periods or 6 periods. I don't need last year's as well. So what I would do with last year's classes, I'm going to click on the 3 little dots and I'm going to archive. Notice it does not say delete. It does not give you the option from the dashboard to delete any of your classes. So don't think, oh, I accidentally deleted it. No, you probably didn't delete it. The only thing you can really do here is move things. So sometimes they get moved accidentally and then you're looking and you're like, it's gone. I don't see it. I deleted it. No, you didn't delete it. It got moved. So you can rearrange these. But if I want to take it off of my dashboard, I am going to archive it. Okay. Now, before we archive, there's one important thing that I want you to do. So before you archive any of your classes, you want to come to the People tab. So where it says People, and in this class, I don't have anybody. Let me go to a different class so you guys can see this. I'm going to come to my People tab. You want to remove your students, especially for your littles. Okay. It's important to remove them because they probably don't know how to remove themselves. For our older kids, you want to remove it so they're not getting back into your assignments, and looking and sharing and doing that thing as teenagers do. Um, Even if you archive it, it archives it for the students. It puts it in the archives folder, but they still have access to get back to it until you remove them. So what I would do is click on the checkbox to select all of my students. I would go to action and I would click on remove. This is my demo classroom, so I'm not going to remove the students, but that's what you should do with all of your classes before you archive them. So with that being said, when I come here, it should look like this. You should be the only person in here, just the teacher. You might have a co-teacher as well. That's fine, but all your students should be removed. So now that my students are removed, I am ready to archive my class. So I'm going to click on the three little dots and I'm going to click on archive. So a few things that it says. Okay. It will archive it for all participants. That includes co-teachers. So if you have a co-teacher, this is going to archive them for that as well. Classes cannot be modified unless it is restored. Can you open an assignment and look at the assignment? Yes, you can, but you cannot edit it, make any tweaks to it. All the class files will still remain in your Google Drive. So just because I'm archiving this doesn't mean that it's going to clean up your Google Drive. And we're going to get into that because that's another beast in itself. Okay. So if that's okay, I'm going to click on archive. You'll notice that that class disappeared. It is no longer listed here. If I click on my three little lines and scroll down to the bottom, I have archived classes. So once I click on there, you can see here is my sixth grade math class. You'll always be able to tell that you're in archive because it has these slashes through it. So if I click on it, I can still see any of my classwork. I can still see how it's set up. I just don't have the option to edit anything. I can click on it, I can look at it, but I cannot edit. So now you're thinking, well, okay, well, she just archived that, but she said we can reuse those posts if we've created a new class. You're right. So this is the one that we created new. In classwork, I want to start my unit 2 and I want to start pulling some assignments in there. So I'm going to create, I'm still going to reuse post. But now when I reuse post, if you look, oh, never mind, they took it away, but you can still see here my sixth grade math class. They used to have in parentheses right next to it, archive. They got rid of that maybe mid-school year with one of their updates, and they have not brought it back yet. And I really wish they would. But here's my archived class. I can click on that and then I can pull in any of my assignments. So here's my unit 3 information. Well, we were doing unit 2, so let's click on unit 2. We're going to say reuse. And remember my topic, this is week 3. I don't want to use week 3 information. I said this year I'm going to put everything under the topic names. So I'm going to create a new topic and call this unit 2. And then I'm going to post that. So I was still able to use information from an archived class. Now, here is the only thing you cannot do. So if I go to my archive, and I'm not going to because I do use some of these for demonstration purposes. If I, actually this one, I don't think I have anything in I could use. Yep. So if I want to get rid of this, so class of 2025, if I click on this, notice now I have the option to delete. I can move this, which just allows me to, same as clicking and dragging. I can make a copy of this. So if I'm like, oh yeah, I put it in the archive, but I forgot to copy it, I can still copy it. Or if I'm like, oh, that was a really good class. Why did I archive it? I want to use it again. You can restore. Okay. I would always suggest, strongly suggest, every school year, create a new classroom. Even if you're teaching the same thing, I'm teaching honors English, I'm teaching it again next year. Create a new class because that creates a new folder in your Google Drive with all of the new students' classwork instead of it being mixed up with all the old students. So again, I always suggest creating new and or copying so it's fresh. Try not to keep reusing the same class over and over and over because your Drive folder is going to be a mess. And I know we haven't looked at Drive much, but I will show you the differences. So if I wanted to delete this class of 2025, I'm going to click on delete. You will no longer have access to it, but the files will still remain in Google Drive. I cannot redo this. So if I'm like, oops, you can't get it back. Okay. But remember this, that files are still in Google Drive. And we'll talk about that when we get into Google Drive here in just a couple minutes. So if I'm ready to delete it, I'm going to hit delete. It disappears from my archive. If I go in to my class and I want to reuse a post, class of 2025 is no longer listed. It is not an option for me to be able to pull any of the posts from that class because it has now been deleted. Archive, fine, not a problem. Deleted, you can't get it back and you cannot use any of those assignments. So another scenario. So I have some teachers that like to have a clean classroom. So what that means is every 9 weeks they want to start over and they only have 9 weeks worth of assignments because it gets too big and it does get big. But what you don't want to do is just go through your class and be like, okay, first 9 weeks is over. I'm done with this. I'm going to delete. I'm done with this. I'm going to delete. I'm done with this. I'm going to delete. Once you delete those assignments, you cannot reuse them. So what you want to do is, especially if you are doing this every 9 weeks. So say this was first 9 weeks. Okay. So what I would want to do is make a copy of this. So I'm going to say copy. This is going to be first 9 weeks. Okay. And then I'm going to create a copy of this. So now I have this. It's going to stay there. Remember, it doesn't copy over any of my students. So my students aren't there, but my students are still listed here. So now this is the one that I'm going to clean up. So if this was all my first 9 week stuff, now I would start deleting these things that my students don't need to see anymore for second 9 weeks. So I don't have to worry about them rejoining because they're already in there. But I still have access to those assignments because I created that copy here. And you can move this wherever. You can even archive it if you want to. But you still have access. So if you want to use it again for next year, you still have those assignments. Students are still here. Unfortunately, you do have to go through. If you are cleaning it up, you have to delete each assignment one by one. Okay, there's no getting around that. If you delete the topic, you're like, oh, I'm just going to delete math and everything's going to be gone. Nope. Once you click on delete, all 4 of these assignments get pushed up here to where there are no topics. Okay, so just be aware of that. You cannot delete multiples at a time. Maybe someday in the future, they'll come up with that, but not right now. Okay. So now let's look at our Google Drive. So this is where it gets confusing and people are like, I didn't even know that was there. And you don't need to know it's there, but occasionally you do need to check on students' work. You need to look at something. You need to find something. So each of your Google Classrooms has a folder. It automatically creates it as you go. Okay. So if I click on this, this was my new class. If I click on this, it's automatically going to populate my folder and anything that's been assigned in here is going to show up. Okay. So these are some templates that I have. You can see in my drive, I have a folder called Classroom. You will have that. Please never delete that. You can delete anything inside of it. Do not delete the Classroom folder. So in my drive, you can see I have it listed here. Do not delete. That organizes everything. If you delete this folder, all of your classes and your Google Classroom stuff will populate in your drive and it becomes a mess. So you want to make sure you have that, but now I can start cleaning this up. Remember, I deleted that class of 2025 Google Classroom. Well, notice it's still here. So Google Classroom creates stuff in Drive, but Drive does not automatically clean stuff up when you're cleaning up Classroom. So you kind of have to clean it up in both spots. So I know I got rid of that class. I can click or that classroom. So I can click on it and I can say delete. I'm going to say move to trash and now it's gone. The other thing I can do is clean things up. I'm like, oh, you know what? There's a bunch of things in here that I used this year that I'm not going to use again, but maybe it's got some student work. I might use it as examples. So when you're in here, you can create a folder. So I'm going to say create a folder. And this is going to be for my 22, 23 classes. So I'm going to say create. And then I'm just going to start dragging all my classes in there. And it's going to say, hey, whoever has access to this is going to have access. Okay, so you can see I'm cleaning things up. I'm organizing it for myself, but nobody's going to see this. But all my classes are going to be listed in here. And then inside of there, let me show you a good example. Inside of there is every single assignment that you create. So as you say, make a copy for each student, it makes a folder. So the folders are listed here, and then each of their assignments is listed individually within the folder, within the assignment folder. Okay. Can I delete these? Of course I can. So if I'm here and I'm like, you know what, the summer journal, it was a flop of an assignment. I deleted the assignment. I don't need the students here. So I can click on this, I can say delete, and everything inside of here will also be deleted. So all of this stuff will be deleted as well. So when I click on this, hit delete, it's going to move it to the trash. It's gone. But now I don't have access to those students' assignments anymore. Okay. But again, if I create an assignment and I delete the assignment from my Google Classroom, it does not automatically delete the folder here. If you want to clean it up, you can. Does it hurt to leave these folders here? Absolutely not. The only thing you might want to do is kind of clean this up with, different, I have past classes, 19, 20, here's my 21, 22, here's 22, 23. So trying to get things organized. So this is not a long list because like I said, most of us are using this more and more for each of our classes. So each year you might have 5 to 6 classes. This is going to get really long. So if you click on create folders in here, it kind of helps organize from within. Any questions with the drive and how the drive folder works? Again, you can never delete this. I mean, you can, but trust me, you don't want to. But anything within, so I know I'm inside of my classroom folder, anything in here, I can delete. Okay. 2 more things that I'm going to talk about. So one is our calendars. So as we are looking at this, um, every time you create a classroom, it automatically creates a Google Classroom, or I'm sorry, a Google Calendar. So yes, there's this button here that says calendar. I don't know why they haven't changed this yet, because once I click on this, this is a Google Classroom calendar. This is not a Google Calendar that I would find up here and go into calendars. This is just within Google Classroom, and it's going to show you anything that has a due date. You can't modify anything here. You can't add anything here. It is just here populated by your assignments and the due dates. So we're going to look inside of a classroom. So if I go into a specific class, so I'm going to go into my new features class, and I have some assignments that I've created. But you can see here, I have my Google Calendar. Okay. So if I click on that, it's going to populate Google Calendar. Same concept as if you clicked here and you went to the calendar here. No difference. But what happens is, as you are creating new classes, you're copying classes, look at what's happening in my Google Calendar. So all those things that I copied and made new ones of today, those automatically generated calendars. So if you are archiving classes, if you anything like that, you want to make sure that you are cleaning up your calendars as well. So when you come here, there are two options. Okay. So one of your options, I don't really say this is an option. If I uncheck it, you can see it just, well, like this one, it'll just turn on and off what is being displayed on your screen, but it is still in your list. Okay. So that's really not an option. Okay. So I have two options. I can click on the X, which means that I unsubscribe from it. So I would have to resubscribe in order to get it back. My other option is to hide it. So I can hide it from the list. So this is my first period math 2023. So if I click on hide from list, you can see that it completely disappears from my list, as well as any of those postings or due dates that were created based on my assignments. So how do we go looking for this, or seeing where it went to? And then my other option is up here. If I click on the X, it's going to unsubscribe. So I'm going to click on that for this one, and you will say you will no longer have access to this calendar or its events, but other people will. So I'm going to remove this calendar. So I unsubscribe from it. So if I come up here to my gear, I can go to my settings. I can also get to my settings by clicking next to any of these and going into settings and sharing here. So either way is going to take me into my settings. But now once I'm here, I can see this is my settings for my specific calendars. Okay. And then settings for each of my individual calendars. And you can see here, I don't have my 2023 first period math. But as I scroll down, you can see right here that I have it, and I have it hidden. So if I want to bring this back, I can click on the eyeball, and you can see it restores it right here. And if I go back to my calendar, it is now visible again. So hiding allows you just to kind of temporary, like, I might use it again. I don't know. If I go back into my settings here, I can then hide it again. Okay. So just think about that as you're working on things. Are you ever going to use it again? Are you not going to use it again? And so forth. So from my calendar settings, if you're like, I don't know why I hit it, I'm never going to use this again, you can unsubscribe. Or if you're like, I deleted that class, I made it by mistake, I'm never going to use it, such as maybe this one, then you can delete the calendar permanently. That means nobody has access to it. Nobody, not you, it's gone. So again, each of these at the bottom of your calendar settings has the ability to unsubscribe and to delete. Okay. So again, as you're creating classes, as you're archiving, as you're deleting, your Google Classroom folder in Drive does not automatically clean up. Your Google Calendars do not automatically clean up. You need to come in here and you need to work on those things yourself. Okay, so the last thing that I am going to talk about, and then we're going to be out of time, is assignment banks. So we talked about creating copies. We talked about reusing posts. So another option is to create an assignment to store all of your assignments so you can pull them in to reuse posts. So sometimes teachers use these individually. So maybe you're like, well, I don't want to copy everything over. Oops, wrong class. And everything's going to be in draft. So you're like, that's a lot. I just want everything to be, I'm just going to pull in what I want. So you can create something called well, we call it an assignment bank. You can call it whatever you want. So what an assignment bank is, a class that there are no people in except for you. So what you can do is you can create assignments ahead of time. You can have these prepared and ready to go. But since there are no students in here, nobody's going to see these until you are ready to reuse the post in your official class with your students. So maybe you're like, okay, well, here's the assignment for how was your summer? I'm going to use that in my class the first day of school. I don't want them to see it yet. I want them to join the class. We're going to talk a little bit about it. And then we're going to get in there and we're going to create this. So I'm going to say create reuse post. I am going to go into my assignment bank. And then inside of my assignment bank, I am going to find my how was your summer. I'm going to reuse this. I'm going to pick what topic I want it to go into. Maybe I want it to go in under class announcements, whatever it might be. And then I'm going to ask that. So that assignment bank is basically only for you. You can create things ahead of time. You can store things in there that maybe you're going to delete and so forth. So, depending on what you are doing, is going to depend where you want this to go. So do you want to create it in your assignment bank to store it, or do you want to create it and maybe you want to delete it out of here? So now you're done with this. I want to delete this out of my classroom, but I'm like, I'm going to use this every year. I think it's a good assignment. So as long as it's in your assignment bank, you can delete from here and I can keep reusing it because I'm going to pull it from that assignment bank. The other thing that I see people using assignment banks for are for teams. And this might be more for grade level teams, maybe subject area. So maybe there's a couple of you teaching sciences, or maybe at the elementary school, you guys have multiple classes, reading, science, social studies, math. And you guys want to make sure you guys are doing the same thing. So you can create items in your team bank for other people to use. So maybe here's some things that I created for science. So I'm like, oh, you know what? That was a good field trip. Other people in the third grade team should be able to use this. So I'm going to create it here. The only people that would be in here are teachers. You're not going to have any students in here. So just teachers. So, and then they can reuse these in any of their classes. They would modify it. Why would you use a team bank versus just adding the teacher as a co-teacher? Because then their students and your students have to be in the same classroom and everything's getting populated together. Well, when you're trying to grade, could be a mess. You're like, oh, this is Mrs. Smith's student. This one's my student, because it just arranges them alphabetically. So when you have the team bank, you create the assignments here. And then when you're ready to use one of those assignments, when I'm here in my Google Classroom, I can say, okay, I want to reuse the post from my team bank. And then I can pull in, oh, that was the good field trip that Rebecca was telling me about. I'm going to do this with my students, and I'm going to say reuse. Now it's available in my classroom for only my students to see, because maybe we're doing the field trip tomorrow and Mrs. Miller's class is doing it on Friday. So then it's only available to my students to see. Okay, I am going to stop there. Thank you for joining me.